My name is Rob Weiner, and I am Associate Humanities Librarian here at Texas Tech, liaison to the School of Visual and Performing Arts, and librarian for art, sequential art, music, film, theater, etc. And I'd like to discuss my brand new book related to graphic novel and comics. And I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Dr. Jeremy Short from the Rawls Business College, who has created or co-created a graphic novel management textbook. So what we'll do is talk about our work here. For a long time, especially in the academy, comics, graphic novels, the term used today, the highbrow term is sequential art, have long been considered to be trash literature, to be something less than worthy of academic study, despite the fact that if you read comics going all the way back to the 1800s, to the superhero comics of the 40s, romance comics of the 50s, underground comics of the 1960s, all the way through the superhero stuff and all the stuff that's being produced today, you find cultural history. You find mores, you find things discussed in those books that are worthy of any academic to study and teach about. And one of the things that most recently we've discovered is that reading a comic doesn't dumb down the literature at all, or dumb down concepts, because you have to use both sides of the brain. And I think both the right side to interpret visually and the left side to interpret the narrative and text that may be there, to interpret what is happening and what is going on. One of the things that I've been interested in, and it was suggested to me by one of my colleagues here, Brian Quinn, and others, based on my previous work documenting Marvel-related graphic novels and works related to Marvel characters, including children's books, and a collection of essays related to my favorite comic character, Captain America. And these are, most of these essays are from academics and from history, political science, philosophy, etc. But as a professional librarian, it is interesting to me to see how libraries across the board have used graphic novels. Thus, graphic novels and comics in libraries and archives, essays on readers, research, and cataloging. And this covers everything from school libraries and how they've incorporated graphic novels, to the history of the graphic novel and its tenuous relationship to libraries, to a very original essay looking at Japanese manga and how Japanese libraries have coped historically with manga. But by and large, for academic libraries, the collection of graphic novels and the teaching using graphic novels is a fairly new development, I'd say within the last 10 years. One of the things that I argue in my introduction is for the academy and for universities to survive in this economic, electronic age, whatever you want to call it, they have to offer courses or using popular culture or adapt their concepts to new and different formats, like Dr. Black's Atlas Black graphic novel textbook.
Well, my book is Atlas Black Managing to Succeed, and the sequel, Atlas Black Management Guru, comes out this month. And really, I come at this from a very different perspective and angle than Rob. My background is in business, and most of my research is very empirically based, theory-driven, methodologically sophisticated academic research. But when I was a doctoral student starting LSU, Louisiana State University, the first book I went and picked up was a cartoon guide to statistics, because my background in stats wasn't that strong, and so I needed a bit of some remedial aspects. So I always found that very interesting, and it stayed with me. But the idea of doing a textbook really came up many years later, and really it wasn't driven so much by a rich history that I had in comic books or anything of that genre. It was more thinking of clips I would show in the class from The Daily Show, or movies like Office Space, or TV shows like The Office. And I found that meanwhile, many textbooks would have a concept and discuss it and go through this application of a concept that we were trying to teach in business through a lot of very unrelated examples, and many times examples mentioning companies that maybe the average undergrad wasn't really familiar with. At the same time, you'd see a lot of pictures that were oftentimes kind of stock photos that really had almost nothing to do with the particular concept being discussed. So the idea for me to come up with a graphic novel is how can we apply these concepts in an interesting way. I knew I couldn't get the budget to make a business movie, but I could find a way to get this graphic novel moving that would tell the storyline. Students starting a business, potentially inspire students to start their own business, which is common more and more these days with an entrepreneurial focus that we have at Tech and other universities around the country. So how could we kind of have fun with the format, make fun, but really engage students and keep their interest while quickly applying concepts and directly applying concepts in a related way. One of my favorite stories, for example, in the first Atlas Black book is when he goes to the job fair, because I think a lot of people's experience was maybe like mine was as an undergrad. The job fair was a place to get cheap plastic stuff and not really a place where you explored potential opportunities. In the second book, Atlas gets funding for his new company and kind of ends with the opening of it. One of the things that I liked in this chapter was when his best friend David gets a puppy and tries to apply some of the ideas of training a dog to how you would manage and motivate humans, and some of the ways that some of those concepts apply and some of those concepts don't necessarily apply so well. But that's the perspective that I've used in this, and kind of as a backstory learned more about comics and sequential art and graphic novels, which is the term we like to say when we don't want to say comics because that might sound bad as I've moved forward. And consequently, I've done a couple of other similar works with that. One was an article that was published in the Business Communications Quarterly, a peer-reviewed journal, looking at how you would apply these concepts to business and how they're very applicable. Another project I did was really the first, and maybe only still, Harvard business case in graphic novel format. One of the faculty at Harvard contacted me when he knew about the Atlas Black book, and he was kind of looking at this from a story perspective. He had a case that he had written several years ago that told a story of an IT company that's being attacked, and he thought to himself, well, if we could apply this in more of a graphic novel format, even more visual, even more rich, that would be a really interesting project. So we ended up working on that, and the thing that I found great about that is that, we've used it several times in our MBA classes, which is important because it's a higher level of student that has quite a bit of background. You don't have to walk through every single concept. They sort of get these things. And what I've been impressed with using the graphic novel and how it's really exceeded my expectations using the case was how much they could quickly read through this case and get into not only the content of the principles we're trying to teach, but really the characters, remembering very quickly the names of the characters, remembering aspects of the personality of the characters. And what we've had them do, a typical Harvard case, or many cases, will give you a longer case to start off with and then sort of follow-up pieces where you guess what happens, and then here's more information, then now what you do, and then there's more information. And so we've had them do quite a bit of role-play exercises, doing skits and things like that, and they've really gotten into it and been able to apply that material very quickly. And the Atlas Black series we've used with that audience who's really enjoyed it, as well as undergrad students who, I know for me personally, I had my highest teacher ratings ever, so I'm not sure that's completely attributable to that. Hopefully I'm learning other things as well to improve teaching, but I don't think it hurt either. Well, I think the response has been really positive. A couple of things that were interesting to me and I guess exceeded my expectations. One is, we'd send out copies for review, and one of the reviewers on Amazon.com said that he was 65 years old, never been a manager, but worked in a ton of different jobs. And not only did he love the book, but really the thing that was interesting to me is he wanted to see what happened next. And because we had broke this book up into 2 volumes. And the same thing with students, both undergrad and MBA, and really more MBA students that ask me, after class, well, what happens next? Does he eventually open the business? What happens? And I've just never had that, kind of reception with a textbook. Rarely, or probably never in a textbook, do people say, what happens in chapter 10? Does it cover more things about diversification or alliances? But so you really have a level of engagement that you don't associate with most textbooks. So that response has been really positive. And we've had people pick up stories and write things on the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, a London site called Business Because, Publishers Weekly. So it's something that people have seen as very interesting and engaging in a new format. And a great thing about it, especially when I think of some of the things Texas Tech is trying to do and a lot of universities around the country, is the price point. And one of the things we were able to do with the publisher is have the price point more like a graphic novel or comic or just trade book than a textbook. So each of the Atlas Black volumes is around $15, which is just a fraction of what most textbooks have. So it's, we didn't write it to dumb down things in any way. Really, we wrote it to be better, more engaging, more interesting, more exciting, and less expensive. So more concept and entertainment for a lot less dollar.
Dr. Short hits on a very important point here about the sequential art form, and that is that it is, like soap operas, a continuing story.
Sure.
We still have stories related to Spider-Man and Batman. Batman's 70 plus years old. What happens next? There's always that element to it.
And it's something that people want to hear about. So people that aren't students in any way or related or graduated or started their own business have read the book as well and really enjoyed it. It's a kind of book just like people like to watch The Office and Office Space. It's something that you would read and enjoy with no interest tied to the curriculum or the things you're trying to learn from it. The storyline is engaging, and you learn about business despite yourself by reading the story and what's going on with the characters, and really get that kind of investment of what's going on. Most management subjects are inherently interesting. There's something in the Wall Street Journal every day, to the extent that they'll make jokes and clips and elaborate things on the Daily Show making fun of it, shows that it's something that just piques people's interest. And maybe certain subjects don't lend themselves to that kind of humor and style and pedagogical approach as much. So that could be part of it as well.
I think it's very telling that our provost, Dr. Bob Smith, whose background is chemistry, academically, for his last couple of books that he's written, he's used comics, sequential art, to further illustrate the point that he's trying to get with the text. And so, if the provost is using this, then we can say, hey, there really is legitimacy.
Sure.
And the results you're getting in your classes, there's the legitimacy. The results, I believe we had talked previously, you'd mentioned some other folks who have adopted it for their classes have had very positive results. Institutions of higher learning ultimately are institutions of higher learning. That's the key. And sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. But this is a form of that can be used that obviously is having great success.